I definitely was writing all the time as a kid and drawing my own really terrible comics. It was very clear early on that I had no future as an artist. Well, there's a hard economic truth, and that is it's basically freelance writing, right? So you have to establish yourself. They're not going to just say, okay, here's like 5 different series you can pick and choose and write. And then I also needed, and I still to this day have like a side gig for X number of hours a week that I know is going to come in no matter what.
Hello and welcome to Prolific Perspectives. This is Kamal Hassan, your host and founder of Prolific Animation Studio. We are all about exploring innovation, entrepreneurship, and how to be successful. Today we have an amazing guest with us, Ethan Sachs. Hey, Ethan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Glad to have you with us. So Ethan, please give your brief introduction to our audience so they will know more about you.
Okay, well, my name is Ethan Sachs. I'm a comic book writer. I was a longtime journalist before that, 20 years at the New York Daily News and about 5 years on the side for NBC News after that. And primarily known probably, or best known, I should say, in comics for a lot of the Star Wars work I've done and some Marvel work. And a series that I did with my daughter, A Haunted Girl, which was inspired by her real life hospitalization for depression and anxiety.
All right, so Ethan, I wanted to start with my first question. What were the earliest comics, films, or characters that first made you fall in love with the storytelling?
You know, I learned how to read with comic books. I think I was 3 or 4, and my dad got me, I remember, Flash comic books specifically. But also at the same time, the sort of seismic pop culture event of my youth was Star Wars, the release of Star Wars. And I'm old enough, unfortunately or fortunately, that I saw it. I remember very vividly seeing it in the theater in the summer of 1977 with my father. And the memory is so vivid that I can still hear his voice. And he passed away in 1995. So it's still a very special memory for me.
Great. So you have spoken about gravitating towards Marvel characters because of their struggles. What was it about flawed human heroes that connected with you so strongly when you were young?
I think, you know, as I mentioned, like the very first ones I got were actually like a DC character. But from there, I definitely got more into Marvel Comics, X-Men, Captain America, Daredevil. What I liked about them, I always related to the characters that struggled. You know, in the case of X-Men, like I saw, you know, being sort of shunned by the rest of society. You know, Daredevil is a character who had this physical disability, but that also in some ways made him stronger. There were all these, you know, characters that I just, for whatever reason, there was something that made them feel more human to me than, and with all respect to someone like Superman, I just sort of felt that that was a character that could punch his way out of anything and rarely made a morally questionable choice. So like, I just really liked the characters that were a little less powered, but also a little bit more human.
Great. So before journalism and before comics became your career, were you already writing stories as a kid, or did that creative ambition show up later?
No, I definitely was writing all the time as a kid and drawing my own really terrible comics. It was very clear early on that I had no future as an artist. But my parents were very supportive. My father had been forced into dentistry by his parents, and he used to joke with me that used to say it's very important to do something you love, because most of your waking hours will be doing it. And that's more important than money. That's more important than, you know, status. And he said he would support me in anything I chose except for dentistry. And if I chose that, he'd break my fingers. He was kidding, I believe. But they also were like, you need to, you know, basically find something pragmatic. So if you want to write, journalism seemed like something I could do. Comic books were not even on my radar because that was like the Keebler elves in a tree making cookies or being an astronaut. It just did not seem like a realistic job to me. So as a kid, I sort of focused on journalism.
Great. So you spent 20 years at the New York Daily News. What did that newsroom environment teach you about discipline, deadline, and finding the human core of a story?
I think even before I was at the Daily News, I did an internship at some local newspapers in New York, like community newspapers. Mm-hmm. And I think like one of the first things that the editor who went on to be a reporter at the New York Times, he told me, his name was Andrew Jacobs, and he told me that you're not writing for yourself, you're writing for your audience. And so like how you explain something to your audience, like that's the sort of the crucial thing. And that stuck with me over time. You know, if I'm writing a story, who am I writing it for? On some level, I'm writing it for myself, obviously, because I have to be into it to
absolutely,
you know,
you have to like feel the character or the story yourself. Yeah, I get it.
But I'm translating what's in my brain and what's in my heart to something that can be understood and digested by someone else. And so who like, what am I trying to get across? And so that helped me as a journalist. And I kind of feel like that was one of the things that helped me later as a comic book writer. And then also, like, frankly, the deadline pressure has been big for me with translating that into comics, because at the end of the day, you can have the greatest idea, but if you can't get it down on paper and out the door in time for it to, you know, to actually get done, no one's going to see that idea. And so like to this day, I give talks at high schools and colleges and like libraries. And like one of the pieces of advice I always give is like, you've got to get it out of your head and you got to vomit it out of your head and onto 100%. The keyboard, or, you know, like, or it will never exist. Yeah.
Makes sense. So at what point did journalism stop feeling like the final destination and comics start feeling like a serious second act?
Well, my not so secret origin story is kind of unusual. At the Daily News, among other things, I ended up being sort of a film reporter, but I had sampled a lot of different things, crime reporting, other things. And among the little side gigs I had was what they called the geek culture beat. So a lot of that was comics. And like I was the one who broke the when Marvel killed off Captain America in Civil War about 20 years ago now. But you know, that was our exclusive. But you know, I developed contacts over time, including a good friend of mine, Joe Quesada, and this is his company hat that I'm wearing, Amazing Comics. But he, at the time, he had left as editor-in-chief of Marvel, and then he was chief creative officer for Marvel. And I had been given, I always do like Star Wars related stuff for the Daily News around May the 4th, that important international holiday. May the 4th be with you. And that year in 2016, I had interviewed the actor who played Greedo, the character that you know, that in my era shot second, or didn't shoot, but Han Solo shot him. But over time, George Lucas had changed it because he had second thoughts about Han Solo not looking heroic enough, sort of shooting first, and it became this whole sort of manufactured controversy of like who shot first, whether it was Han Solo or Greedo. So the guy was so funny, Paul Blake was so funny during the interview that I had the idea of doing a murder investigation, but treating it like Rashomon. And for those listeners who don't know what Rashomon is, Kurosawa movie, classic based on a Japanese novel about a murder in feudal Japan, where nobody, like all the witnesses have different accounts, including the ghost of the victim. So I was at a Mets game with Joe. I could not get the idea out of my head of this murder investigation to Greedo's death. So I asked Joe if I could write a spec script for comics. And because I was a journalist, I would donate the money to charity or whatever. And I'd be completely transparent about it. I just wanted to get it out of my head and onto paper. And he was not enthusiastic. He said, sure, whatever, like that. So I had read a lot of comics. I reverse engineered like sort of the format that I wanted to use, the pacing, how to use the page turns, you know, the equivalent of jump scares in movies. And I wrote it, and I had a contact at Lucasfilm who put me in touch with Story Group so I could see what I could and couldn't do. And then I ended up sending it and didn't hear anything for like a couple of months. So I thought, okay, well, I got it out. I did what I wanted to do, and I didn't think anything of it. And then my wife is Japanese. We fly to Japan and to go visit my in-laws. The plane lands back in New York on September 7th, 2016. And I get the email that changes my life, which is the subject line was F Greedo. I won't spell it out for your listeners. But the upshot was, never mind Greedo, like this is actually like a really good script. And I think you could do this for a living. And now, meanwhile, at the same time, the newspaper, print is shrinking. Every year in the last few years of my time there, I was seeing mentors getting laid off and just downsizing. And I knew one day it's going to be me. And around the same time as I get this email that Marvel wants to talk to me about doing some comics, there is an offer for a buyout across the company. And I had been there 20 years. So that was 7 months pay, which, like, if you're going to make a career change, that's the cushion, So long story short, that was my first foray into comics.
Great. So there is a great origin story involving your May the 4th article, the Greedo idea, and Joe Quesada. Can you walk us through that turning point in your own words?
So it was largely like, just the what I just said. But the cool thing about it was, or maybe the hard thing about it was, that's just the door opening, right? And so, Lucasfilm ended up not allowing. Marvel wanted to publish that story, but it was rejected for a number of sort of, fair reasons that I won't go into. But the reason that helped me launch my career was that some editors had read it inside Marvel. So that gave me the chance to pitch a series called, they came to me and said, what about this series called Old Man Hawkeye that we want to do, which is a prequel to Old Man Logan, which is kind of a famous series in Marvel, a post-apocalyptic series where like the villains rose up and killed all the heroes. And then 50 years later, Wolverine, who's renounced violence, is forced to sort of go on this journey. And one of the characters was this character, Hawkeye. So they wanted to do a prequel series, and they gave me the opportunity to come up with an idea. I was going against some other writers, and that ended up sort of being my way in. So I ended up getting that series because of the Greedo script gave me the chance to have that editor audition me.
So when Joe Quesada encouraged you, did that feel immediately life-changing, or did it still take time before you believed comics could become your career?
Well, there's a hard economic truth, and that is it's basically freelance writing, right? So you have to establish yourself. They're not going to just say, okay, here's like 5 different series you can pick and choose and write. They're ongoing, and you're going to get a check every month. So there was like an economic strategy that I had to have as I'm trying to build up my career. So for example, not only did I have that financial cushion, number one, my wife has a full-time job that has health insurance. So I didn't have to worry about my daughter, being covered or anything like that. I could, and she was very supportive. So there was that, and that is, I think, key, especially for an American comic book writer or artist. And then I also needed, and I still to this day have like a side gig for X number of hours a week that I know is going to come in no matter what. So for a long time, I was freelancing at NBC News. Now I'm freelancing with UNICEF USA, and so always having something like that on the side. So if it's a slow month or a slow stretch for comics, I'm not panicking. I have like a basic safety net. And then the other part of the puzzle was eventually I wanted to do my own stories that I would own or co-own with the artist. And so you also have to make time for that. And that's like a net zero or net minus income because you have to develop that.
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of it. And then also I make time to volunteer for some causes. So like right now for the No Kings Coalition. So like, the essential for me has been compartmentalizing my time, so I'm hyper efficient on everything.
So how did that your own writing or own projects go, own IP thing that you're writing? So how did that go? Like, how did that turn out?
Well, I've just dabbled. Like, so I have essentially 2 things. This one shot I did with an amazing Mexican artist, Marco Lorenzana, who's also the artist on the book I did with my daughter. We're working on a sequel. So like those have been my first. I'm also pitching something else, but with another amazing artist, Stephen Cumming, who's based in Japan. And so like I'm still kind of getting my feet wet with that, but it's nice to do both. The analogy I use for people who are not in the world of comics is essentially there's like work for hire, which is it's like being a session musician for Taylor Swift, right? You're paid for your time in the studio, but it's not your song. So like the work I do for Star Wars or Marvel or other, Dark Horse, I've done an Avatar series, James Cameron's Avatar. That's like I'm paid for my time in the studio. That song could be a huge hit. You get a little bit of royalties, but it's really about you're doing a job for someone else. Yeah. And then creator owned is like one of the most famous of which is like The Walking Dead as an example. Not mine, obviously, someone else's, but that's someone's idea, and it's like they own the tune. So it's and I think it's great to have a balance between the two, because I do love Star Wars. It's not like that's a chore or something. I still am a 4-year-old when I sit down at the keyboard and get to dream about this stuff. Or I did a Predator Badlands prequel for the hit movie that came out, and man, to like work with the filmmakers to come up with that idea and the enthusiasm and all that kind of stuff, and getting to write superheroes. Amazing.
So as you just mentioned, the superhero. So Old Man Hawkeye was your major Marvel breakout. Why did that book become the right entry point for your voice as a comic writer?
Well, I will say this. I think it's amazing that Marvel took a chance on a new, I had done one 8-page story before that, and they took a chance on a fairly high profile story. And they paired me with this artist who was rising to become a superstar even as this was coming out. He actually was pulled off 2 issues before the end to work on Daredevil with Chip Zdarsky, who's a superstar writer. So I was lucky to get paired with, it was well received. It sold well. But they also took a chance. I mean, for them to take a chance on a 12-issue series and like that, it's something actually that doesn't really happen. And that was 2018, I think. So the chance that they took, even now, 8 years later or whatever it is, like that is, that doesn't happen now, in the industry. So I was very lucky that they took that risk on me.
Great. So Clint Barton in Old Man Hawkeye is not just heroic, he's aging, haunted, and running out of time. Why did that version of Hawkeye let you explore emotionally that a younger version might not?
Well, I joke that because I'm older, that maybe I'm typecast because I've done I've also done Old Man Quill, who's like with the Guardians of the Galaxy. But really, I love 2 things about it that I related to. First of all, I love the character because the heroes that I like are not, are heroes that can punch their way out always. The Star Wars characters that I relate to are sort of the street level characters, the bounty hunters and all that kind of stuff. But what I love about Hawkeye in particular is he's kind of like just this everyman that, you don't know for sure that he's going to survive from panel 1 to panel 6 on any page. Right? Like Batman is 5 steps ahead of everybody, every opponent, all this kind of stuff. And this guy is just by the seat of his pants. Like he has no grand plan. He has no, he's just figuring it out as he goes. And he does one thing well, and that's shoot a bow and arrow, which when you're fighting aliens and giant robots and stuff like that, that doesn't seem like the most useful skill. So I love trying to figure out how I'm going to keep him alive every issue, much less the entire series. Because he's always in over his head. So I love that about him. And in particular, I really liked the arc that he had in Old Man Hawkeye, which was 2 things. It was, number 1, he's losing his vision, right? So he's on a ticking clock about having to complete this mission. So I could write him kind of getting less and less skilled with the one thing he's good at as he goes, and how does he compensate for that? And then the other thing too is he was kept alive because it's kind of like a screw you to him, where he's the villains are like, you're so inconsequential that we're going to leave you alive, and that's his own torture because he has all that guilt. So it's like, oh man, what a toxic stew I could play with, like this poor guy. He's
Yeah.
losing his one ability that he's good at. So, he's been left alive, and he knows all the people he's failed by not, saving the day or whatever. And so, man, I can play a lot with that.
So when you take on iconic character with decades of history behind, what do you look for first? Voice, vulnerability, conflict, or the part of them that still feels unsolved?
I think, and that's a very good question, a very good way of putting it. I think when I tackle a character, like I wrote Luke Skywalker recently, or a character that has been around for a long time and people know all sorts of it, has a long history of other stories. I try to first and foremost focus on the core of what makes that character great to me. So like, what is it about their personality or about their, just the heart of that character? And then I try to take that character and put him or her or them in a new situation, but they're still that character. And then whatever continuity, I try to be careful that it becomes like Easter eggs or like little kind of fun add-ons for the fans, but it doesn't get in the way for new fans. Like, so you don't have to do your homework to read one of my comics. But if you have done your homework and if you put in the time, then you'll see these little details or these little plot points that aren't sort of closed off to new fans. They may not understand the importance of this little detail, but I try to have it both ways. I try to have my cake and eat it too. So yeah.
All right. So Star Wars has become one of the defining parts of your comic career. Why does the universe keep pulling you back creatively?
Well, I think it's as much as it's the universe, I think it's also Lucasfilm and Marvel. I think once you prove that you care and that you're treating this as lovingly as they do, because everyone involved, it's not a business for them. It's like they're kids who've grown up, who love this stuff, and they get to do it for their job. So it's like that passion is very much still there at every corner of every part of that organization. And so I think number one, you show that you can do it. You show that you can do it on deadline. Yeah. That's the other thing. So there's trust that you build over time. And then for me personally, I mean, I just love it. I just, of all the sort of pop culture touchstones that I've had over my life, including Marvel, including, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, all that kind of, Star Wars is my probably biggest love. And so getting the chance to play in that sandbox is just, I never get jaded. I never get tired of it.
Great. So Galaxy's Edge was a fascinating assignment because you were not just writing with it canon, you were helping expand the world tied to a real immersive destination. How different was that from writing a standard comic series?
I mean, it was tougher on the artist, Will Sliney, than it was for me because, as he said, because we started, the park was not finished yet. They were building it, right? And what his big worry is that he's going to be drawing stuff that doesn't fully exist yet, but will when the comic comes out, or or when someone is holding it. So someone could be walking around the park holding this comic and see all the mistakes he's made because it's not like a normal fictional comic book thing where you don't you don't have to worry about that kind of scrutiny. But it was top secret when we started. We had to sign all these like NDAs and stuff like that to have access to this amazing document, this 168-page creative Bible that had maps, schematics, and character studies and all this kind of stuff. So we could work off. And it was really great to see behind the curtain because the talent of the Imagineering, the Imagineers from Disney who built this world and basically took Star Wars out of our heads and made it real. It was just amazing, the scale and everything. So on one hand, it was tougher in terms of having to run everything by different people and the back and forth because everything had to be tight and perfect. But I like to tell this one story that kind of shows the power of Disney and the cool part of working on Star Wars.
Uh-huh.
So the first Galaxy's Edge was a heist story, and it was set. There were sort of flashbacks that go back and forth to the adventures that got these sort of elements, these objects and relics and things like that were in the Doc Ondor's Den of Antiquities, which is a store that you can actually visit. And all the items are there except for one, or were there except for one. And I was like, you know what? We need another item. The artist and I came up with this really cool. Will and I came up with this really cool Kyber crystal statue that was inspired by St. George versus the Dragon. It had a Jedi fighting this like serpentine creature. And the issue comes out, and everyone is like, oh, I found the black sword, and I found the baby Sarlacc, and I found this, and I found that, but we can't find this statue. Like, where is it? And I was like, oh my God, I didn't think they're actually going to be looking for it. So I frantically email a publicist or media guy at Marvel. I was like, well, how should I answer this? He's like, don't say anything. You don't want to draw attention to your mistake. So I don't say anything. And then 2 months later, it's there in the store. Like, they just built it to cover my butt, I guess. But so you can actually see it. It's like this glowing green statue that's on the top of the wall behind the cashier, and it's there. And so I thought that's the coolest thing, like the power. It's like, not only are you making up stuff that goes on printed paper, but you're making up stuff apparently that goes out into an amusement park, so that was kind of cool.
Great. So Bounty Hunters become one of your signature Star Wars books. What did writing the underworld side of that galaxy allow you to do that Jerry Sanders story usually cannot?
So I love the gray areas. I love the flawed characters. I also love the characters, and I say human, even though many of them are Trandoshan, like reptilian or whatever. But I kind of feel like the vast majority of people that would live in the Star Wars galaxy wouldn't necessarily care, or like their daily lives would not be as impacted no matter who won, because they're just trying to survive. And, so they're not thinking like the good versus evil that is the sort of core of the main Star Wars stuff. So they're, it's like, it's more, it's just more grounded, I think. And actually, as I was writing this, my daughter was going through a mental health crisis. And so, Bounty Hunters was supposed to be like a sort of action star in space vehicle for this Marvel character named Valance. And that Valance is a cyborg that Marvel created in 1978 during the first Star Wars comic book run. And because it was a Marvel created character, they felt like we could do more with it. We're not worried about how the mythos ties in with the live action or anything. Like we could have, and then all the background characters would be the classic Empire Strikes Back bounty hunters like Boba Fett and others. But what I glommed onto was, I want to tell a story because his backstory is he was a former Imperial soldier who was injured, and he has and now he's a bounty hunter. And so I really, really wanted to tell a story about a soldier who's battling PTSD. Like, he's fixed himself as best he can on the outside, but he's still a work in progress on the inside. And that kind of, because I was dealing with a lot of my daughter's mental health stuff and my mental health reacting to it. And so the idea of like trauma and all this kind of stuff and baking it into that character, like that was my springboard, they're all those characters are survivors and like doing what they have to do to try to pull themselves out of, these horrific backstories and all this kind of stuff. So that was my way in. And I think like a lot of fans saw themselves in those characters. And so that was kind of cool.
Great. So as Haunted Girl feels like a very different kind of a project because it is so personal and because you created it with your daughter. When did you both realize this story needed to exist?
Well, so while I was writing the second issue of Galaxy's Edge, my daughter had a suicidal crisis and was hospitalized. She was a freshman in her first year in high school, very advanced, like science and math high school, a lot of pressure. But in addition, she had warning signs that we completely missed over a few years. And, because I was a freelance writer, I could work from the hospital cafeteria, like between visiting hours, to go visit the ward where she was staying for like a week or so. And I was distracted. I was trying to write, but I was distracted, obviously worried. It was like a whole new world for us, like our reality. It was like suddenly, instantly like shifted. And I wrote down in a notebook one line: "The fate of all life on earth rests with a girl who doesn't know if she wants to live." And I didn't know what the story was at the time, but I had a great working relationship with Marco Lorenzana, and I decided I want the two of us to jam together on a story that will inspire my daughter to keep living and maybe other teens. And it took years. We were close to a deal in February 2020 with another publisher, and that fell apart because of what happened in March 2020. And then, but that extra time, like my daughter was getting into a sort of better place with therapy and medication and just personal growth. And so we were able to do it together. I asked her if she wanted to write it with me. And it's the story of basically a 16-year-old girl who's fresh out of the hospital after a suicide attempt and struggling to reintegrate into school. And she finds out she's the only one who can stop this supernatural apocalypse. And while it's not an exact replica of my daughter, the character Cleo is half Japanese like my daughter, had some injury issues related to athletics like my daughter. So there are all these like elements that we sort of worked in together. And my daughter, basically wrote all the teenage characters, all the therapy stuff.
Wow.
And she likes to say she did the internal demons. I did the external demons. Like that was our split.
Great.
But we teamed up with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and the American Psychiatric Association. And we had guides in the back. We were like on CBS News and NPR, Mashable, People Magazine gave us like a whole few pages in the print edition, which was amazing. And last year we got the 2025 Lifesaver Award for Education from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So that was really cool. And last summer she was the face of a nationwide PSA on teenage mental health.
Wow.
So and we're working on a sequel. So it's been great in so many ways. We give talks and things like that. And one of them sticks in my mind. Actually, I did a signing by myself at Third Eye Comics in Annapolis, Maryland. And a teacher came up to me and said that he bought copies of the first issue for at-risk students in his class.
Oh.
And one girl told him that she read it and then called the crisis hotline in the back because she had been feeling for a long time like she was thinking about suicide. And so in that moment when she needed help, she knew what to do because of that comic. And so
Correct.
Whatever else, media coverage, awards, sales, whatever else, that to me was the most meaningful moment for me, was knowing that one person, we did what we wanted, what we were hoping for that one person, no
Great.
idea
Purpose has been
how many other people.
That moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the book uses supernatural horror, but at its core, it is dealing with anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. Why was horror the right language for that story?
So both Marco, the artist, and myself are huge horror fans. And what I love about horror is the best horror is it's cathartic, and it also taps into something beyond whatever the plot is. For example, I watched Exorcist very differently as a traumatized kid, watching it way too young, and as an adult. As a kid, it's like that loss of control and that, not being yourself and all this kind of stuff. And as an adult, it's like the powerlessness to help your child. And so that's what makes it scary, even beyond the demonic stuff. It's that's the core fear that it taps, fear of death, fear of zombies, fear of losing identity, all that kind of stuff. So I thought with the horror, it taps the feeling of horror of going through this, both for the child or the teen or, the person who is having, the crisis, but also for the people who love that person. And so, that was sort of why I thought. And then the other thing too, is by making it a fantasy, you give a level of cushion, where the person is not so triggered. It's not a documentary. It's not hyper realistic. It's not like, there's a level of fantasy that gives you a protective cushion. And so I thought long and hard. I have to say that some publishers wanted no part of it because they were worried about the themes and they thought, okay, the art is really good, but it's too like realistic, you know what I mean? As opposed to if it was more cartoony, more manga kind of thing, then we could go for a tween and teen audience. But I wanted it to feel like a PG-13 horror movie, because that's like, I kind of feel like teenagers can understand that.
So you work with an American Foundation of Suicide Prevention to make sure the material was handled safely and responsibly. How did that collaboration shape the storytelling choices you made?
Well, there were some notes, and I'm glad. Like, I always listened. There was one or two that I felt like for the story I really, as cautiously as possible. But as an example of two notes that were great, and they were flagged. We also had another sensitivity reader who had gone through something similar in a younger age. But like two notes that stick out. One was there was a line where, so at first she sees things. She sees this giant spider creature, but she thinks she's imagining it, right? Because for the plot, we needed her not to know about what's going on until about the beginning of the third act, right? Or the end of the second act. So like she has to see things that she doesn't believe is real. So we had a line like, it must be the meds or something like that. Like she's blaming it on the meds. And we didn't think twice about it because it's just a plot point. She can't know what's happening until later. Like she has to realize her place in this later. She has to go through a journey, right? And it was flagged. Actually, it was flagged by both the Brett Ween, who is our contact at the AFSP, and Vasilis, who is a psychiatrist. And it was like, please don't demonize medicine, because it's such an important part of people's treatment. And if they feel like, oh my God, it's kind of like a stereotype or something, it's not true, usually. And if it is, like, people change medications or whatever, if there are side effects or whatever. So in this case, it was like a plot point for us. We didn't think twice about it. And they quite correctly flagged that for us. And so we changed it. It's like, it must have been a nightmare. And it's like, for us, it was no different in the plot, but we did not demonize medication, which is an important part of my daughter's, treatment and everything. And then another one that sticks to mind is like the sort of the head demon, the big bad, grabs Cleo by the arm, and there's like some blood. And then like part of that was for this ritual, it's like some drops of blood. And then, they were worried about cutting and things like that, and didn't want to in any way, sort of embellish it or something. And so then it became more of like sort of a sucking of a life force, as opposed to like a bloody or not bloody, but like having blood involved in the ritual or whatever. So it was like, that's the kind of thing that didn't change the plot. It's everything, but it was like more mindful of what accidental repercussions could be.
So you have been very clear in your notes to us that you are strongly against AI in creative work. So from your perspective, what do people still fail to understand about what it is it at stake for writers and artists?
I think, and I thank you for bringing that up. I do appreciate that. I think, the biggest problem with AI is that it is being developed in a way that just puts ethics and puts ramifications at a far backseat. They're not considerations. It's really about the sort of the profit and the Wild West of trying to develop before you're. And so specifically when it comes to my industry, a lot of the generative AI that is used, and the argument I always see is like, oh, well, I'm an amateur person. I can't afford an artist. I don't have the time to fully, number one, it's a craft, right? Yeah. Anyone can work on a craft, but it takes time. It's like if you pick up a guitar, you're not going to play like a virtuoso the first time, but if you put in the effort, eventually you will. And so number one, it is a craft that the people who are in this industry have spent years working on and toiling on, and not always for money, but and so number one, I think the human element of art is essential. But
It
number
is.
two, there's also a legal and ethical part of this, and that is these models have been trained by taking artwork and taking writing without compensation and without permission, just
Yes.
scooping it off the web. And essentially what you can get is like you can have a superstar artist and you can type, I want to draw Batman like this artist, and it will take that art
Yeah.
and regurgitate a version of it. So it's not original. It's taking
It is not.
copyrighted works that has not been authorized to do so. And so basically it's going to be a situation where it's going to be hard to keep up legally for your own rights. And this is not people whining and being unjust or whatever. This is their copyrighted material that they've, not just big companies, but this is like artists' own work. So you can create a situation
for individual artists, who's gonna, support them if, they'll steal their IP, because big giants, they'll get the compensation for their work, their artwork. But for individual people like you and other people, if, AI will copy their stuff, who's gonna fight for them? So I get it. Where you're
exactly. Like your becomes on you to chase. And then you often like, the AI companies have like, can spend money on lawyers. And the problem is the government is very slow to react. The current administration, taking aside my own intense dislike of them from many fronts, they are supporting AI above and beyond the law, and so it would kind of suck to be an artist and lose jobs to a version of yourself.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because the thing is, AI doesn't create anything new. It is putting together a new version of existing material. That's all it can do. And I'm sure you can find important uses for AI in other fields and other, like maybe medical imaging or whatever. I'm not nuanced enough to, to sort of, but I can say that a lot of what is the AI industry now is done without ethics and without long-term vision, beyond let's make as much money as we can, and damn the consequences.
Absolutely, 100%. So looking back at your full path from journalist to comics writer to co-authoring something as personal as A Haunted Girl, what is the one honest piece of advice you want to leave with the next generation of storytellers?
I think I'm going to cheat and give two. I think number one, something I alluded to before, is you have to write. You have to get, and there's no first draft that's good. So whatever you're going to write first is going to stink. And that is true of every writer that you love as well. But by getting it out of your head and onto paper, you can edit it, you can work on it, you will get better the more you write. And so that, it would be like picking up a guitar and thinking you're going to play, a Tool song right off the bat. And, eventually you can work your way up to it, but you have to start learning the chords. Like you got to start, and so really, I think the difference between aspiring writers who eventually get to write in some capacity for a living and ones who don't are the ones that can get out of their own head. Because there's always going to be a voice of doubt. There's always going to be this attempt at perfection that you can never attain. Like, this is not good enough. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to throw this out. I'm not going to write this, or I'll and then the other piece I would say is your single biggest currency. And actually Charles Soule, I credit him for putting this in my head. Your single biggest currency is your time. And so you really have to figure out how you want to spend your time. And that can be like, you have a million ideas and they're like, maybe they're all great, but you need to start with one and really see that one through. Because if you keep thinking, I have this other idea that's really cool, and you put that first idea, you get nothing done. And so I think like that is essential, that you prioritize your time. And related to that, if you're an aspiring writer, you need a side job, because there's no scenario where you're just going to come fresh out of the gate and make enough to live on, right? There's just no scenario. But if it's something you really believe that you want to do, then it's worth, think of all the actors who've taken bartending jobs and, or bike messenger jobs or whatever it is between auditions, and they're churning because like their passion like is worth it. And so you need to sacrifice a little bit and sort of build out that very pragmatic, less romantic version where at least on the side you have a part-time job that helps see you through. And that also allows you to stay in it and keep trying longer. So those are my two pieces of advice.
Great, impressive. So thank you so much for joining us, Ethan. It was a pleasure to have this conversation with you. It was insightful and absolutely inspirational story. So thank you for tuning into another episode of Prolific Perspectives. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ethan Sachs. We hope you enjoyed it. Like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time.